This always seemed like a very crude tool to me, and it's made by, I believe, Roper Whitney. And it's used by furnace men, and they particularly like to use these to get into the plenum when they're installing an air conditioning or unit or something like that. But what they do is you just use a hammer and you strike it right here until you pierce the metal. And once you pierce the metal, and I've already done that, then you can just, the cutting takes place right here. And there you go. Sharp as can be. And on the back side, you can see it's a bit of a mess, but when time is money, that's what they use on your furnace plenum. This is another type of double cutting shears. And the teeth have a little bit of a serrated edge on them, so it grips the metal. But you can see what it does here. This is the cut that I just made. Again, get those gloves on. I'm sure I'll draw blood before this video is over. Like that. Actually, it's not too bad of a cut either. And you can curve or straight, but a double cutting tends to work so much better going straight than it does a curve, unless it's a very large curve. This could be used in body work, I suppose, too. I believe you've all seen the Adele Nibbler, Adele Tool Company, Chicago. And if you've never seen one before, you kind of don't know what to do with it even, but the actual cutting edge is right up here. And they sell extra blades, just a tiny little blade, almost looks like a guillotine, I guess you say. And it makes tiny little chips as it nibbles. You have to drill a hole to get this thing started if you don't have an edge to start with. And you can go with curves on this too. And I'm attempting to show you the chips that come out the bottom. But there's the little chips. Makes a rather wide kerf. And I've had one of these for years. I really think they're neat. And it's similar to an electric nibbler in what it does. If you ever use the electric nibbler, I do not have one to show you, but the principle is the same. You're nibbling away at the metal, little bit at a time. This is my pride and joy, a Beverly Shear, and it's got about a 24-inch handle on it. And you can cut curves or straight with this. And they make this in 3 sizes. This is the B1, which is the smallest one. And there's a B2 and a B3, and the B3 is quite big. Again, no round stock, because in a school shop or someplace, this is very likely where the janitor or just about anybody is going to come in and put something round and large and maybe even hardened in there and chip the blades. And the blades are horribly expensive or can be sent out to be sharpened, but since they're curved, it's not something you can sharpen by yourself. And that's a Beverly Shear. And I forgot what the capacity on this B1 is, but it's certainly a little better than what you could do with any other kind of hand snips. I've clamped the Beverly to the bench, and I have here some 16th inch thick aluminum. I don't know what gauge that is in the, but it's not the same gauge, of course, as steel sheet metal. But I put a line on there, and you can cut straight or curved with it. And again, stay down into the throat. But you can take a fairly long cut too. This came out of a school shop that was closing. A lot of my equipment came from school shops because so many of them have been converted into computer labs. I don't like it. Quite a nice cut. Now I'll round the corner off. I have laid it off into a radius. and you turn the work rather than turn the snips. Sometimes you need just a little bit of light filing, or take it to the belt sander, and then you have a perfect cut. That's soft aluminum though. In a case of utter desperation, you can cut with a chisel. So if you lay your line right along the vise jaws, and you're literally shearing it along the vise. And I like to use really what amounts to a wood chisel. And I've got so many chisels that it doesn't dull them quite as badly as what you might expect. But using a ball peen hammer and the chisel, would need a little filing. You can saw sheet metal too, so I have here a piece of that galvanized sheet clamped between 2¼ inch pieces of oak held in my Colombian vise, and I'm using, this is a combination for you, this is a French hacksaw. Howdy out there, you Frenchmen. And we see very few French tools here, but this is nicely made. And what a combination this is. The blade's made in Sweden, and it's a fine tooth, 32 teeth. Make sure you use a fine one when you do something like this. Not that anyone will ever do this. And I'm not using a layout line here, I'm just rough cutting. And on the piece that came off, it's really quite a nice cut. And didn't snag it. There's a burr, of course, that you would need to remove. You can use your bandsaw too, if you have, with a piece of wood on the bottom, if you have a fine enough blade. I'm talking metal cutting bandsaw now, not wood cutting. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the Ket electric shear. It's double cutting also. And they work very well for straight lines, not so well on curves unless it's a very gradual curve. Made fast work of that. I probably don't need to tell you this, but on thin aluminum like this is art metal or shim stock and so on. If it's thin enough, get your wife's best sewing scissors, and that'll do just fine. Not her pinking shears. Anybody know what a pinking shears is anymore? Now you can also use a jeweler's saw for your thin brass and copper and other art metals. And I use a standard scroll blade in there like you might use in a scroll saw. It's a little bit short. And don't confuse this with a coping saw. Throw that coping saw away. They're about useless. But you need to saw over a board with a V in it. Works real well. And of course the artist would have a pattern on there, a layout. And remember that these cut on the downward stroke. The teeth are pointing toward the handle. Well, the handle split on that thing, but I'm going to finish off, and then I'll have to throw this away. And don't scold me for throwing tools away that are no good. Not working too well. The handle split on this one. So I broke out another one. It's a little bit bigger one. made in Germany. Again, it's a jeweler saw, not a coping saw. And you can cut straight or curves with it. It's cutting on the downward motion. You'll see a lot of Christmas ornaments and so on in the little shops that are made with a jeweler saw, with very intricate designs and so on. And you can drill a hole through your work if you want to start in the middle. And this could be done as well on your scroll saw. You can cut metal on a scroll saw, just take it easy. Brass and copper are very soft. So is silver if you can afford to use it. Well, that sums it up. Those are just some of the ways to cut sheet metal. There are probably many, many more, and of course the modern ways, and foot shears and squaring shears and so on. But that's about the sum total of what I'm going to show you today about shearing metal and the various types of snips and shears. This is Tubalcain saying so long for now. I hope my wife doesn't watch this video because she's been asking what happened to that blue pillowcase. Anyway, another way of doing this, or cutting soft aluminum, and siding installers and trim installers do this all the time. They just use a handy knife and a square, and some of this aluminum they use, you know, is white or brown or other colors like that, and just scribe it very hard one time with this. Now use a wide straight edge or square so you can keep your fingers out of the way of this blade, and keep this up against the square like that. Of course you want some wood underneath it, and then all you got to do is snap it off and you get a real clean cut, real clean. You'll see the siding men do this on their bending brakes, where there's a piece of urethane or something under there where they're scribing. Good method, but watch your fingers. There's an awful lot of specialty tools that are made for sheet metal, or were made, and one of the companies was Whitney Metal out of Rockford, Illinois, and here's another Whitney. Then it became Roper Whitney, and I don't know if it's still around or not, but this is a notcher, or I call it a notcher, 90 degree. I believe this to be a rather expensive tool, and you can, if you're making a box or something you need to notch out, put it on there like that and you got it. Must be one little dull spot on there. Works real well. And you go any different depth you want. It doesn't have to be all the way in. Just up to your layout line. Don't cut yourself. Now this little notcher, I'm not sure what the exact application was, but it's similar. It just cuts out a narrower notch. If you're making little tabs and doing ducting work and something like that, along that line, I think that would work just great. Works equally well or better in brass. And any metal, ferrous or non-ferrous, within its range, and I'm not sure exactly what its range is or was, but this is a neat tool. I've had this shear for a long time. I don't remember where I got it, and I do not believe it's for sheet metal. I think it's for installing flooring, tile and so on, vinyl tile, asbestos tile and so on. But I like to use it for light gauge sheet metal, and sometimes I cut cardboard for patterns and things in there. But we got an edge here we can square up, just like a squaring shear, and just shear it off. That works real well. would work well for narrow stock as well, like this brass. So keep your eye open for tools that you can use for sheet metal work, even if it's not made for that. This is made of aluminum, so it's relatively light, but it seems to work just fine on lighter material. And the name on there is Kepro. Kepro, K-E-P-R-O. Never heard of it, but it's pretty nicely made. And the price was right.